Congratulations, Rob, on your induction into the NJSD Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much.
Very proud of you and your accomplishments, and you're very worthy of inclusion in this group. In our previous conversation, you revealed to me that you in high school were considered mostly a math and science guy by your buddies, but also that they probably wouldn't be too surprised to find out that you're now a law professor. Can you tell us a little bit about that path and what that journey was like and how it ended up the way it's ended up?
Sure. Well, there are a lot of steps along the journey. I'd say as a kid, I was always someone who's very curious about the world around me, and still am, and I would ask a lot of questions, probably more questions than most of my teachers actually wanted to answer. But questions about really big things, some of the biggest things in the universe, black holes or galaxies, questions about little things like, electrons and protons and neutrons. And so that lent itself very naturally to science and math. And, I had some wonderful teachers at every level, including at the high school, my high school physics teacher, Pat Westfall, or, Harry Blobom, who taught me calculus. I mean, they really fostered those interests. But at the same time, I was someone who was always interested in current events. And I had lots of questions about public policy and fairness and justice. And so after graduating, I went to UW, and I was fortunate to have some really amazing professors there, world-class teachers and scholars in the humanities and social sciences, and they really cultivated sort of that side of my interests. And I ended up majoring in economics and political science there. And after that, thanks in part to some of those professors and mentors, I was really fortunate to be able to go to England as a Rhodes Scholar and study at Oxford University. I got a master's degree in social policy, which was sort of a logical extension of the economics and political science work I had been doing. And, and that was the first time I'd been out of the country at all. And so really an amazing experience. And as you study social policy, I think you realize before too long that whatever kind of policy you're talking about, tax policy, healthcare policy, environmental policy, it's all the creation of law. And so then law seemed like a natural next step. And I went to law school at Yale, and again, just had terrific mentors and professors there. Had 3 years in law school, and after that, again, was very fortunate to be able to go to work for the federal judiciary. I worked for a wonderful judge on the Federal Court of Appeals in California named William Fletcher, and then went to work at the U.S. Supreme Court for a bit. From there, I became a practicing lawyer for about 5 years. I was at a major law firm and worked in San Francisco and in Washington, D.C. And that's a great job, fascinating, challenging, but also tough in some ways. It's a very client-driven job and driven by court deadlines, which means you don't have a lot of control over your schedule. You don't have a whole lot of control over the kind of issues you're working on. It's sort of what your clients need. And so then an opportunity came along for me to become a law professor, and not just anywhere, but back in Wisconsin. Yeah. And so I was thrilled to have that opportunity. And now I've been at the university for 7 years. I have an office that overlooks my old dorm. And so I haven't quite made it all the way back to Neenah, but in some ways I feel like I've come full circle. And here I am teaching. That's part of the job. And I've taught a number actually of great students from Neenah over the last few years. I research. I'm still able to do a little bit of practicing on the side, and it's great now that I have the chance to sort of raise my own family back in Wisconsin.
That was quite a circuitous path, and but great that you're back in Wisconsin. You brushed over a little bit the serving as a law clerk for the U.S. Supreme Court, and those people are not exactly household names, but I think that's a very influential and important position, obviously, and you served in that capacity for several years. Can you share a little bit about what that job actually entails, and maybe some of your experiences in that position?
Sure. Yeah, I think you're right that the judiciary is maybe the least well understood of the branches of the federal government, and in particular the U.S. Supreme Court, I think to a lot of people is a little bit of a black box. It's by far the smallest of the major government institutions in Washington, D.C. So there are 9 justices on the Supreme Court, and each of them has a very small staff. They have a few non-lawyer staff people, and then every year they hire 4 law clerks who tend to be fairly recent law school graduates. And the job of a law clerk is to really help the justices do their jobs. The Supreme Court has the luxury of getting to choose which cases it hears, And every year, thousands of people will petition the Supreme Court to hear their case. And so part of what the law clerks do is they sort through all of those thousands of petitions, review them, give some advice to the justices about which cases they should take. Once the justices decide which cases they take, the law clerks help prepare the justices for the oral arguments that are heard in the case. And then once they're at the point where they're ready to write a decision in the case, the law clerks will help out with the research and drafting of those opinions. So they're kind of involved as, helpers from start to finish, and, really an amazing opportunity for a young lawyer. I mean, there are some real legal luminaries who work at that court, and, as you said, they're not household names, but some of them are. I mean, I worked for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who, was an amazing civil rights litigator even before she became a judge, and then had an incredible career on the U.S. Supreme Court. And so being able to sort of work closely with and be mentored by individuals like that. I also worked for Justice Sonia Sotomayor. I was with her during her first year on the court, and so it was really a special experience to be able to see her as she settled in to that new job.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that. In our previous conversation too, you talked about how formative your years at Neenah High School were, especially your involvement with the debate program. And if you can talk a little bit more about that and how that helped you along the way, and maybe also reference school activities in general and how important those are, as there are some kids here today that maybe would like to hear your words on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Debate, and I also spent a lot of time doing forensics, kind of a close cousin of debate. I mean, those, like all extracurricular activities, I think they teach some very important lessons, about teamwork and discipline and time management and all those skills that are very important to have. But I think that, there was some special value that debate and forensics delivered, and, I just, to this day, have a huge amount of gratitude for the coaches who spent so much time with me over the years. I mean, starting in junior high school, actually, with the late Don Weinman. And as I think about it now, in retrospect, I mean, what a human being to spend his weekends on buses with dozens of sugar-fueled junior high school students going to debate tournaments. And then in high school, Bill McBride, who coached debate, and Jan McBride, who coached forensics. You might think, oh, do we really, is it really great to have an activity that just teaches kids to be more argumentative? But there's so much more to it than that. For one thing, to the extent that it's about arguing, it's about trying to figure out the right ways to argue. You don't win debate rounds just with rhetorical flourishes. It's really, evidence-based, and you learn how to gather evidence to support your position, to convey that. You learn to think strategically and critically, to communicate efficiently. And so, some of the speaking skills that come out of that, there are a lot of life lessons that I think I've taken away from that activity.
And what areas do you find most of your current academic work focused? What are you really into at the moment, and what do you see maybe coming down the road that you may be getting involved in?
Yeah, well, so most of my academic research is in the area of election law. And so, that means issues of voting rights, money in politics. Right now, I'm spending a lot of time dealing with electoral redistricting and gerrymandering, because we're in the middle of the once every decade redistricting process. So timely, fun issues to think about. Like a lot of other Americans, I have my concerns about the state of democracy in our country, and I think we're in a place where our politics is much more divisive and polarized than it was when I was a kid. There was a big sort of public opinion survey this summer that suggested that only 14% of Americans think that U.S. democracy is in good shape. And the remaining 86% either think that it faces major challenges or that it's in a full-blown crisis. And so additional work that I'm doing right now, just this year, I've launched a new project at the law school with my wife, Miriam Seifter, who's also a law professor and has some overlapping interests, and it's called the State Democracy Research Initiative. And part of the idea behind this work is, we in particular want to focus on understanding democracy at the state level. We hear so much about federal policy and federal politics, but sometimes states get lost in the shuffle, and that's unfortunate because a lot of our day-to-day life is affected by what happens in state governments. And every state has its own constitution, and although we have some familiarity with the U.S. Constitution, we have much less with the with the constitutions of, the state of Wisconsin or any other state. And so we want to draw some academic attention to these issues of state democracy, and hopefully put it on the radar more for members of the public, members of the media, policymakers, and ultimately we feel like if we better understand state democracy, maybe there are some possibilities to help improve our politics, strengthen our democratic institutions, make our discourse a little bit less divisive, elevated a bit. So that's what we're working on now.
There's a lot on your plate, and
Yeah.
it's fascinating to hear you talk about it and share your enthusiasm and energy. We're so proud of you being from Neenah and taking this time to share with us today. In conclusion, is there anyone else you would like to thank for their inspiration and support, motivation throughout the years?
Yeah, I mean, I could go on this one. I've already mentioned a few names, and I was very fortunate during my entire education here, from elementary to junior high and high school, and had so many wonderful teachers along the way. One specific person in that category who I haven't mentioned as a mentor during high school is Dave Sabora, who was a guidance counselor at Neenah High School, was the advisor to the National Honor Society, which I was involved with in high school, and is someone who I've kept in touch with ever since. But just a great example of someone who cared so deeply about students. So those teachers and mentors from the elementary to high school level, so many at the college and post-college level as well. But of course, first and foremost is my family, and I'm very fortunate to have had them be my biggest supporters from the beginning. My parents have lived in Florida for a while now, Stu and Helene Yablon, but maybe those names are still familiar to some folks. My brother and sister, who were just a few years behind me in the Neenah schools, Brian Yablon and Elizabeth Yablon. They had to put up with me for all those years, and so I have endless gratitude for that. And then of course my family now, my wife, who I'm very fortunate to work with every day. So we make that work for us, and it's great. And then my two kids, who are now 8 and 6, Max and Rose. And Max, the 8-year-old, said to me as I was coming up here today, "So if you're going to be in the Hall of Fame, does that mean you're famous now?" And I had to tell him, no, probably not, but it's a nice recognition nevertheless.
Well, you're famous to us. So thank you again for being here, and thanks for your time, and congratulations.
Thank you.